The series begins with Sheriff Holston preparing for his day. He also does something suspicious on a vent in his room, but we'll get to that later. Holston is the sheriff of the silo. The silo is a large, expansive network of underground bunkers completely detached from the outside world. Holston says that no one knows who built the silo nor why they are here. They do not know when it will be safe to go outside, and they've lived here all their lives without knowing the outside world. These poor people have never touched grass. If anyone says that they want to go out, they are put in a special cell called Holding Room 3. One day, Holston locks himself in Holding Room 3 and looks out to the desolate landscape. Then he calls his deputy Sam and says these 5 simple words: "I want to go out." He also adds that he should have done this 3 years ago. Deputy Sam has no choice but to keep him locked up. Let's see what happened 3 years ago. Holston and his wife Allison received permission to conceive a baby, making them very excited because this is their 3rd time trying, and Allison is already 38. Whenever someone gets this permission, it is a huge deal and everyone knows. A fertility expert named Gloria offers to consult Allison on the best way to have a baby. But Holston thinks that Gloria is a fraud. Next, they go to their doctor, who removes the birth control from Gloria's body. They can now make a baby. Yay, and they have 365 days for that. The moment they go home, they go to town on each other. Allison is an IT technician, and one day, she gets into trouble for writing an article on how to recover lost data. Turns out, 140 years ago, some rebels deleted their history. Now anyone trying to uncover the past gets punished. Half a year passes out of their pregnancy opportunity, but Allison still hasn't become pregnant. One day, Gloria approaches Allison with some questions. What was in their deleted history? And was it even the rebels who did it? She says that Allison asked too many questions, and the government, called the judicial, wouldn't want someone like her to have a baby. Allison starts to believe that the judicial is tampering with her pregnancy, but Holston does not believe that. Later, an IT expert named George contacts Allison and says that he's also interested in recovering their history. George has found a very old drive with some mysterious files, but he can't access it. The dating on the drive puts it before the rebellion 140 years ago, so Allison goes to work on it. Meanwhile, the rest of the silo is celebrating Freedom Day in honor of ending the rebellion 140 years ago. Their mayor, Ruth, talks about how the rebels tried to open the gates to the outside world to bring in the poisonous gas from the outside, or so she claims. Meanwhile, Allison and George manage to open the drive, and it turns out have all the information about the silo from even before the rebellion. But Allison gets scared and leaves, right after telling him to destroy the drive. But of course, George doesn't do that. He looks at the blueprints and finds a secret tunnel that no one knew about before. Meanwhile, Allison is still deep in thought about what she saw, so she goes to Gloria's to know more about why the judicial wouldn't want her to have children. Then she goes to George and asks to see everything from the drive. They spend long hours going through the records. One day they discover a video that shows the outside world is safe and green, lush with nature. Her mind starts becoming occupied with all these secrets, but she does not tell her husband any of them. By the next day, they only have 7 hours left from their pregnancy permission time. Allison tells Holston that the judicial doesn't want people who ask questions to give birth. The judicial wants docile and obedient people. As proof, she shows him the birth control pill that she just removed from her body. The doctor was working behind a curtain, and he only pretended to remove her birth control. Allison starts bleeding, so Holston goes to call the doctor. But Allison goes to the public cafeteria where she claims that the screen is fake and the world outside is green and thriving. Holston tries to calm her down, but Allison says those dangerous 5 words: "I want to go out." Everyone is in shock. As per tradition, Deputy Sam handcuffs her while Holston can only look in shock. They put Allison in Holding Room 3 and also bring in Gloria and George for questioning. Next, they will send Allison outside in a special suit to clean the cameras, but they always die in the process of cleaning. Allison apologizes to Holston, but she's sure that the world outside is safe and good. That the desolate area they show on the screens is actually fake due to some digital manipulation. She says that if it's actually as bad as the screens show, then she won't clean the camera. But if it's green and beautiful, then she will clean the cameras, as a signal to him. Mayor Ruth and Holston say the final official words, and then they put Allison in a special suit and send her outside, with Holston doing all the things a sheriff should do, but with tears in his eyes. Allison goes outside with everyone watching, and then she begins to clean the camera. The world outside is green, according to her secret message to Holston. While everyone continues watching and cheering for Allison, she goes over to the hill to see what is on the other side. But before she can reach the top, she drops dead. and everyone else goes on with their usual lives. 2 years later, George is also found dead, after falling from a great height. Holston and Sam go to check his body, and yeah, George is definitely dead. However, one of the engineers believes that George was murdered. She's a very important mechanical engineer who controls the generator in the silo, and her name is Juliet. Back to the present, Holston tells Sam that he's doing what he's doing because he started listening to what Allison had been trying to tell him all this time. He wants to go out and find her. Sam says that her dead body is right there on the screen, but Holston has come to believe that that might not be her. As per the tradition of the silo, Holston gets the same gear as Allison did, while Mayor Ruth says the final words. This time, Sam does the things that Holston did earlier. Hundreds of people come to watch what happens to him, including Juliet. They are all really anxious because this is the first time that the sheriff himself decided to go out. Meanwhile, Holston admits that Allison was right. The world outside is green and thriving. He decides that the people at the silo must see this, so he goes and cleans the cameras while everyone cheers. Then he goes toward his wife's body, but he starts struggling, so he pulls out his helmet, the first time that anyone did that. Then he struggles to go to Allison's body. He reaches her and dies. Juliet becomes angry and says that Holston is a liar. She goes to the generators and screams out of anger, breaking a water pipe accidentally. Back at the cafeteria, people become angry that the sheriff was sent out there. Meanwhile, Sam reads a letter that Holston left. In it is the name of the person that Holston chose as his successor. A woman comes in and says that Holston probably did what he did because he truly loved his wife. Sam goes to Ruth to ask who will be the next sheriff. Ruth wants Sam to take the job, but Sam says that he plans to retire soon. Ruth is worried that Holston's death will cause instability among the people. People are already stacking up on weapons. Elsewhere, Juliet goes to an old friend of hers and says that something's been bothering her. She's sure that George was killed. You see, Juliet and George used to be lovers. She talks about something that happened just before George died. He says that he needs to show her something. They are supposed to leave that night, but George does not show up. He's left her a strange device and a message saying that he's found something. The next day, she finds out that George fell from a great height and died. The people say that it's suicide. Juliet goes into a panic at the death of her lover. She tells a deputy sheriff, Hank, that it must have been murder. George would never kill himself. Hank cannot do anything without proof, but he does tell Juliet's thoughts to the sheriff, and that was how she met Holston. They check the location where George's body was found. Juliet is convinced that George showed no signs of killing himself, so Holston decides to look at George's body again. He shows the body to Juliet, who has to struggle not to cry. They check George's wrist to see if he has cut himself before, because most suicidal people would try that as well. No cuts. Next, Juliet shows him the stuff that George left her. Neither of them recognizes the blue device. As for the letter, she's torn the lower part, and the upper part says, "Remember where you last saw this?" She shows him another thing, a secret tunnel that no one knows about. It's full of strange markings, and no one knows who did them. In a secret tunnel within that secret tunnel, there is the giant device that was used to dig the silo called the digger. Very creative. Now the digger is no longer in use. They go to a little hideout in there that apparently George put together. The last time Juliet saw the little blue device was down here in a little box. There is other stuff here from before the rebellion. Things like a miniature of Lady Liberty, a shuttlecock, a seashell, and a video camera. But neither of them knows what they're used for. Juliet finds something odd. The plastic wire used to be rolled around the spool, but now it's leading them somewhere. It leads them to a bag over the edge of the beam. Inside it is the old drive that George and Allison worked on. There are instructions on a page on how to recover old files, written in Allison's handwriting. Seeing the old drive, Holston decides that it's time to stop the adventure and report the drive to the judicial. But Allison yells that if he had listened to her wife, maybe she would have still been alive. That really hits a nerve with him, and he says that Allison asked questions too, and she was never afraid. Juliet asks him to help her, so Holston decides to help her. He takes the drive to investigate it further and says that he'll send her a signal if he finds anything. And that was the last time they ever talked. Holston never contacted her again. Back to the present, Mayor Ruth and Sam discuss whom to choose as the new sheriff. Sam finally admits that Holston actually left a successor in a note. He didn't Ruth until now because he thought it was ridiculous. The person Holston chose was Juliet, the mechanical engineer. And even if Ruth does not choose Juliet as the sheriff, he asks that his badge be given to her. Meanwhile, Juliet goes down to their secret hideout and thinks about George. George said that according to some old blueprints, there's supposed to be a door at the tunnel under the water. So now, Juliet decides to do what George planned to do. She takes a bunch of rope and goes towards the water, despite being very scared of water. However, her flashlight falls inside, and she's stuck right outside on the surface. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and hit that like button to help our channel grow. Turn the notifications on so you won't miss any of our new videos.